In fact, that's the photograph of them cutting the men out. This is the Oklahoma right here on the side.
I'll be darned. Well, the poor thing's in about 3 miles of water out there now.
Yeah.
I'm glad she is.
Instead of being junked.
Yeah.
Where's your favorite chair?
Well, I sit here. Beautiful thing, but this one will be all right.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll get some more.
Now, before I start on this yarn here, if you got anything particular you want me to do?
Nope. Just let me see. Today is February 17th.
That's right.
1988.
1988.
This is Joe Todd, an interview with Mr. Earl C. Dunn in Corpus Christi.
Mm-hmm. Corpus Christi, Texas.
Corpus Christi, Texas. Okay. Tell us your yarn you have.
Well, the reason that I went into the Navy, at that time Corpus Christi was a very small town and had no opportunities at all to get anywhere in it. You know, in other words, there was a farming area, farming and ranching. And I was going to high school, and I was a junior in high school. Had finished my junior year, and went to be a senior the next year. But I just couldn't see anything here at all to stay for. So I joined the Navy. I joined here in town. They had a recruiting office, came in here, and I joined a fellow named Pittman. And I just went to Houston. They sent us over to Houston, and we waited till they got a 4 or 5, or I think it's about 15 men in the whole business from all this area, you know. And they put us on a train, Santa Fe train, to go to San Diego, California, to the Naval Training Station for training. And when we got out there, why, it was that station that just opened. And we were one of the first companies that went through it. They'd moved it from San Francisco. They'd had it on Goat Island out there, Goat Hill as we called it. But they'd moved it to San Diego. And I stayed there for about, we went through about 3 months. And they put us on a draft to go to the Omaha, Cruiser Omaha. Well, the Omaha was on its maiden voyage from Bremerton, Washington, down to San Diego, and it ran into a storm, and it damaged one of the masts, and they had to go back. So I missed getting on the Omaha. And I wanted to get on because it was a cruiser, and cruisers traveled a lot at that time, you know. And so we stayed around. They kept us down at the Naval Air Station there for a month or so extra, I think it was, something like that. And then they put us to work there, digging sewer ditches and all kinds of stuff like that to keep us busy. And cutting down the hills. There's some high ground in the naval train, around the naval train station. They had us all level that all off, you know. And one day I went and looked on the bulletin board, and my name was on the list to go to the battle plate, go to the California. So there was about 100 of us there. And so the next day, the 2 destroyers came in, the Shirk and the Kidder. And they put us on those right there at the Naval Training Station. And we got into San Pedro that night about 1 o'clock in the morning it was, about 1 o'clock in the morning. And they put us all aboard the California, Battleship California. And the officers, 2 or 3 officers up there, picking out the men they wanted. In other words, and they picked out all the best looking men, you know. And they put the rest of them on a boat and sent them over to the New Mexico. California was a battleship, commander of the battle fleet at that time in the Pacific. And so they sent us over to the New Mexico, and that was, I believe it was a flagship of Battleship Division 5. Well, the New Mexico lined us all up on the deck, and they picked out all they wanted. There wasn't very many left then. So then they put us on a boat and sent us over to the New York. The New York was a flagship of Battleship Division 3, which had the Oklahoma, Nevada, and the New York, and I believe it was the Pennsylvania. I'm not too sure. But anyway, the New York picked out all the best, and there's only about 5 of us left, and I was among the scrubs that was left. And we had to stay on the New York for about a week. And the Oklahoma was at that time was in San Francisco, and finally they came down there. But while I was on the New York, that was a rough bunch on there. They stole everything that I had. They got into my sea bag and and stole my shaving gear and everything I had in there was any good. But finally I got over to the Oklahoma. They sent us over to Oklahoma. It came in, and the crew on the Oklahoma seemed to be an entirely different brand. The boatswain mate there took me around to the showed me where my bunk would be. I mean, where to hang my hammock, and I had little old ditty boxes they had on shelves, you know, and you could put stuff in the ditty box. So I was assigned to the 5th Division, deck division. Well, every morning we'd have to get up at 6 o'clock and scrub the deck and polish the hatches and do all that stuff, you know. And I could see, we were on the back deck there, and there was the upper deck, you know. I could see underneath there was a bunch of guys sleeping in their compartment. I asked the boatswain mate one morning, I said, what are those guys sleeping in there? How come they're sleeping when we were having to work up here? And he said, well, they're watchstanders. And I said, well, what are they watching? He says, they're radio men. I said, that's what I'm going to be. So I went down to the executive officer's office, and they had a little pot there, and there was some request blanks in it. And I filled out one of the request blanks asking to be transferred to the radio. And I'd never heard a radio. I'd never heard one. I wanted to be transferred to the radio division. And so the next morning, the boatswain mate called me over and said, he said, you know, your division officers, I won't mention his name here, is mad as hell with you about putting in that application without his signature on it. All right. He was the officer of the deck at that time. We were in port, and he had his field glasses on. He was officer of the deck. And later on, he saw me, and he called me. He said, come over here, Dunn. I went over and saluted. He said, I understand you handed in a request for to be transferred to the radio division without my signature. And I said, well, I did, and I'm sorry, I didn't know I had to have it. He said, well, you're in the 5th Division now, aren't you? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, you're staying there. All right. So about 15, 20 minutes later, I got a messenger came up in the executive officer's office and said, come down. The executive officer wanted to see me. And I went down there, and he was a Mustang, and he was rough as the devil. So I walked in and saluted, told him who it was, and he says, why in the hell haven't you been transferred to C Division? I said, well, Mr. So-and-so, my officer, division officer, told me this morning that I couldn't go. I was going to have to stay in the 5th Division. He said, the hell he did. And he wrote that piece of paper out, transferred it to him. Well, I got into the radio division, and I was never so fascinated in all my life as I was with radio. And I studied that stuff, and went over and bought kits. You could get kits then and build all kinds of sets. And the result was, cutting the whole business short, when I was paid off at Norfolk, Virginia, I was the materiel man in charge of the maintenance of all of the radio equipment on that ship. I just studied so darn hard, you know, and so when I got home, I got a job in a radio shop downtown, and was able to make some. I was paid off in Norfolk, Virginia. We made the cruise down in Australia and went all up and down the coast and everything. But anyway, when I was paid off, well, I came home, and I was able to get a job. And finally, I hit on the idea that the police should have a radio station. The police department, they didn't have anything. The cars what cars they had to stay at the station all the time and get calls and then go out. So I went down and gave them a proposition, and I built a transmitter for them, a small transmitter and 4 receivers. I had to build them by hand those days. You couldn't buy them, you know. This was way back there before they had them on the market, you know, that thing. And it worked out real well. Well, while I was in the Navy, after we got the bunks, the kid on the bunk above me was studying fingerprints. And it kind of mystified me, so I got in with him there, and I couldn't figure out why you could tell a man, you know, by his fingerprints. And so I studied with him a little while. So when I built the police radio station, I operated it. They had to have an operator those days for the police department. And I told them then, I said, I know a little about fingerprints. Let's start a fingerprint file here. They didn't even have an identification bureau. So I started the identification bureau, and later on the sheriff called me wanted to talk to me, and I went down there, and he wanted me to come down there and put in his identification bureau. So I put in his identification bureau, and the result was that he lost his job, in the next election that came off. So I went to work for the district attorney's office as a special investigator, and then they called me down to the police department, wanted me to come back down there and offer me the rank of captain if I'd come back to the police department. But in the meantime, the sheriff had sent me to the National Police Academy, FBI school in Washington. I graduated that school there, and when they offered me this job as captain down there. Well, I went down there, and as captain, I put in their police school and their firearms identification unit, and a whole bunch of different things that they didn't have. And finally, I wound up being chief. And in the meantime, though, I had put in radio station KEYS here in town, a broadcast station. There was an opening here for it. We put the thing in. It made good money and done real well. So I decided I'd quit the police department and put all my time in on that, because I'd get so much more money out of it than it was the police department. And then I had two sons. I married and had two sons, and one of them picked up radio like I did, and he started off on it, and he wound up in the Army as a lieutenant of communications. And when he was in Germany, he was doing service in Germany. They transferred him to the White House Signal Agency, and he went to the White House and served 7 years there as one of the presidential communication officers. Now you see, if I hadn't went into radio myself, he wouldn't have got that, you see. So he served under there, served under Eisenhower and Kennedy, or Johnson and Kennedy, and he came very near being with Kennedy when he was killed over in Dallas. As a matter of fact, he'd been to Hawaii with him, and he came back to Dallas and left him at Dallas to go to Houston to set up his communications system ahead of him, because he was supposed to go to Houston after he got out of Dallas, but he was killed in Dallas. Never did make it. Well, sir, it's a funny thing, you know, how things like that will affect something that happened. That little piece of paper, you see, brought all that on. Well, my son now is retired from the Army. He came out a lieutenant colonel, retired, and it just I sold radio station KEYS, got a heck of a lot of money out of it. And after I got out of the police, after I resigned as chief, they wanted me to stay on down there, so I doing something, and I said, well, I just don't want it. And they said, well, we'll make you director of public safety, and I'll just give you $1 a year, you know, so I wouldn't have too much responsibility. So I held that for a number of years. I was in charge of the police and fire departments. And then there come a hurricane here, and the mayor wanted me wanted to set up a stronger civil defense unit. So he asked me if I'd take it, and I said, well, I'll take it for a year. And the result was that I spent 9 years there. And finally, when I got to be 65, I said, I'm out. I'm through. I don't want any more of it, and you'd have to get somebody else. So I've been retired since I was 65. But that little slip of paper there has changed my whole life, you see. Because if I stayed here in Corpus, and so many things that led up to it, suppose that I had gone on some other ship, suppose the Omaha hadn't have had a wreck, had trouble. I might have went to the Omaha, would I have ever got into radio? And if I'd have went on any one of those other ships, would I ever have got into radio? Seems like it was something steering me through, you know, all the way. Something uncanny.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
When's your birthday?
July the 25th, 1904 was my birthday. July the 25th. You got a pencil?
Oh, I had it. Okay. July 25th, 1904.
1904, yes.
And where were you born?
Right here in Corpus. My great-grandfather came here with Taylor's Army in 1845. My family's been here ever since.
What was his name?
Dunn. Matthew Dunn.
Do you have any stories about him coming to Texas?
I've got a book of my grandfather my grandfather wrote that tells about it. Called The Perilous Trails of Texas. My grandfather wrote the book. He tells all about the family.
Now, was this your great grandfather that came to Texas?
Your great grandfather that came to here was Taylor's Army. He just landed in New Orleans from Ireland, come over from Ireland, and Taylor's Army was there, getting ready to come to Corpus, and he tried to join them. They wouldn't let him because he hadn't had any military training, but they took him as a sutler to handle goods, handle dry goods. I mean, supplies, you know. And then when they went into Mexico, why, they put him on a wagon train, and he served drove a wagon down there, and Mexicans killed all of them but him and one other guy. They managed to get away, and he got back to Corpus all right. While he was here, Colonel Kinney, the founder of Corpus Christi, told him if he'd come back and build a house and live here, that he'd give him 100 acres of land, and that's how it come in with the land. The land we had here. How we give him a whole lot more than 100 acres because it was a lot of waterfront that didn't count.
And did you go through school here in Corpus?
Schools?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, what was your father's name?
Johnny Dunn, John, Johnny Dunn.
And your mother?
My mother's name was Grace Crooks, her maiden name. That's where I get the C in my name, Earl C. Dunn, Crooks.
And was your mother from Texas also?
Gonzales, Texas. Yeah.
And what type of work did your father do? What type of work did your father do?
My father was he was a hunter, you might say. Of course, that's way back there. He died young, but he used to mount animals and birds and things like that. Taxidermist was his profession, taxidermist.
And did you go through high school?
No, I didn't finish high school. I finished the junior grade, and I joined the Navy instead. That's what I was telling you a while ago, that there's no opportunities here at that time for me. If I'd have finished there and stayed here, I'd have had to work in a grocery store or go on a farm or a ranch or something.
And what year did you join the Navy?
I joined the Navy August the 8th, 1923.
And where did you go for boot camp?
San Diego. Went through one of the first companies that went through there. They didn't even have the flagpole up there.
Tell me about boot camp in San Diego.
Well, the first thing that they did, they sent us in there and they put us in what they call the bullpen.
What's a bullpen?
Well, it had a high wire fence around it, guards around it, so you couldn't get away from them. And they took you, and they showed us a big pile of clothes, of white clothes, and they told us, now take off all your civilian clothes and put everything back in your valise, and we'll ship it home. Ship it home for you, see. Tell us where you want to ship. And so we had to put these white suits on, the white uniforms, just out of a junk pile there, find something that would fit us. And then they run us down to the supply room and issued us our clothes and a sea bag to put them in, you know. And then we went through a month or so in that place there, and they wouldn't let you go ashore or anything else. In the meantime, they were looking over you for see if you had any gonorrhea or any kind of diseases, you see. They watched your health. And another thing, you couldn't join the Navy if you were married then. You had to be single. And they wouldn't take in any colored people. And after they called this the bullpen. And after we went out of the bullpen, we went into the main barracks over there, and we were free to, they let us go ashore once in a while, or we call it ashore, or go down to San Diego, or give us a day off, you know. You can go to San Diego. And then when you finished your training, why, they would of course put you on a draft for some part of the Navy, ship or shore station or something like that.
And how long did boot camp last?
3 months.
3 months.
But,
After boot camp, where'd you go?
I went to, as I was telling you all a while ago, I was supposed to go to the Omaha, the cruiser, but the cruiser Omaha was coming down from Bremerton, Washington to San Diego to pick up its draft. It was a new ship. They ran into a storm and they had damaged one of their masts, and they had to turn around and go back go back to Bremerton for repairs. So that canceled the draft to the Omaha. And they put a whole bunch of us to work then, digging ditches and leveling off hills and everything else around this new naval training station there. Flagpole wasn't even up yet, it was laying on the ground. And then, first thing I know, my name appeared on the bulletin board along with about 100 other fellows to go to the California. So there was 2 destroyers came in there, the Shirk and the Kidder, and picked us all up there at the training station and took us into San Pedro. And we got in there about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they sent us aboard the Battleship California, which was a flagship of the Battleship Division then. And they picked out the best men that they wanted. They had a bunch of officers up there on deck, going up and down, look them out, and pick out the men that they wanted, talk to them. And then they sent what was left over to New Mexico, which was the flagship of Battleship Division 5, and they did the same thing. And then they sent the rest of us over to the New York, which was the flagship of Battleship Division 3, which included the Oklahoma and the Nevada and the Pennsylvania, Battleship Division 3. And then when we got onto the New York, what was I said, the Pennsylvania, why they, no, it's New York. They picked out the best looking men on the New York and kept them, and there was only about 5 of us left, scrubs. And we were supposed to go to Oklahoma, so we had to stay on that New York for about a week or so, waiting for the Oklahoma to come down there from San Francisco. And when they got in there, well, they transferred us over to the Oklahoma. But the New York and the Texas were sister ships, built just exactly alike. And the Nevada and the Oklahoma were sister ships. Those days they built 2 ships at a time. And
what were your quarters in the Oklahoma?
My quarters?
Yes, sir.
Well, the first quarters was in the on the port side, in the deck division. We had the port side of the ship on the upper deck. It was an area in there where we all slept. And where that's where the 5-inch guns were, on the port side battery. I was assigned to gun 12, which was a gun that was up on the upper deck up there.
How many 5-inch guns were on there?
10 5-inch guns. No, 12 5-inch guns. I was on gun number 12. 5 below the first deck, and then 2 up on the top deck. And it had 10 14-inch guns, and it had 8 anti-aircraft guns.
And would you describe your quarters on the ship?
Well, they were just had low ceilings, a jillion pipes and wires, all covered with asbestos. Those days nobody knew about asbestos, And at first we had to sleep in hammocks, and they had hooks. There was beams went across the ship every few feet inside, across the ceiling for to hold those pipes up. And they had those hammocks, hooks on there, and you could hook a hammock on there and sleep in it. But then later on, as I said, they set us into the Navy Yard, and we were the first battleship now that had bunks and lockers. They put in bunks and lockers for us as a test. And the funny thing was that they got to be bed bugs in them. The guys that come from the shore, and brought bed bugs aboard, and they got in those bunks, and they got into the springs on the bunks, and they had a bed bug brigade that went go through the ship every so often, take all the blankets and everything off of each bunk, and with a blowtorch and and blow those springs out. Those days it didn't happen that anything that would kill them. And those bed bugs are really a nuisance.
And when did you go aboard the Oklahoma?
Went aboard the Oklahoma. Let me see. Where's my little? What did I do with it? No, it's here. It is here. This is my diary. sign of the Oklahoma, October the 29th, 1923.
1923.
October the 29th. I arrived aboard the Oklahoma on that date. And I was discharged from the Navy May the 24th, 1927. I was 3 years and 7 months aboard the Oklahoma.
What do you think of the Oklahoma? What do you think of the Oklahoma?
Oh, it's a wonderful ship. Life was so much different on it that New York was, I was I'm telling you, that week I spent on the New York I'll never forget.
Compare the New York and the Oklahoma.
What?
Compare the New York and the Oklahoma.
Well, there was the crew. Now, New York at that time was a coal burner. See? They had the New York and the Texas were both coal burners. And the New York, or the Oklahoma was an oil burner. Well, when the New York would go out to sea, it'd get soot all over the decks and everything, you know, and it was a mess. And the men's clothes the high clothes were hard to keep clean because this soot would get on their white uniforms all the time. They wore white clothes at that time, because out in the West Coast, you know, the weather was good and you could wear them most of the time, wear summer clothes.
Now you were a radio man on the Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
What are the duties of a radio man?
What?
What were your duties as a radio man?
Well, when I first went in, of course, they made me a messenger out of me, what they called a messenger. But they had a school in the tail end of the Oklahoma, in the rear end of it, right in the rear end of the ship, on the first deck up. And they had this school in there, and they conducted this school practically every day. And you had to learn the code. One of the first things you had to learn to send a code. And then I was had done so much. I was so interested in it and did so much technical work that they put me down in the maintenance man to maintain the equipment, the transmitters and receivers and everything that they had on the ship. And as I said, when I was paid off, well, I was what they called a materiel man. I was responsible for the maintenance of all that equipment. And in those days, promotions were hard to get. I went in as apprentice seaman, and pay was $21 a month. At the end of my training period at San Diego, I got $36 a month as a seaman second class. And then when I went aboard ship and I was studying to be a radio man, my next thing would have been a third class radio man, which is a third class petty officer, but there was no openings. Went on for a year or two. I was qualified for it, already passed the exam and everything, but I couldn't get it. And finally, one day they come around and told us, said, listen, there's some openings for seaman first class on this ship. And if you can pass it, I will give you seaman first class, being as you're waiting for your third class. And I went down, I learned the semaphore while I was standing in line waiting for them to ask me to on this exam, you know, what they were given. And when the officer of the deck said, or this officer says, give me the semaphore, I was able to go through the semaphore, and I got seaman first class. All right, then I had to hold that for a year or two, and finally I got seaman second class. I mean, radio man's third class, and then finally went to second class, and I was paid off second class. Now there's a thing that this letter that I got from you said there was a man named Hill that was on the Oklahoma in 1924.
Yes, sir.
I don't see his name in that list there. Now it could be an error, of course. But the crew's name's in there, but his name wasn't in there.
Okay, I'm not sure. Now, was this the great cruiser 25?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure how long he was on the ship. I'd have to get his interview out.
He said from 24 to 27,
Okay.
I believe.
Okay.
But his name's not in that.
Okay.
Have you got one of those lists?
No.
Suppose you take that one.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I've got it in the book there. I had two of those made, and I was going to send them to the Oklahoma organization. You know, what do they call it?
The U.S.S. Oklahoma Association?
Yeah, association. Yeah.
Okay.
And I sent them a copy of it, and I sent you a copy of the letter I got about that book.
Yes, sir. Tell me about the great cruiser 25.
Well, the great cruise of 25 was really something. We went to San Francisco. The whole fleet met at San Francisco, and we maneuvered all the way across to Hawaii, which took about 2 or 3 weeks because we had a lot of practice, maneuvers going across the Pacific. And we anchored out off of Waikiki Beach. Diamond Head was on one side, you could see Diamond Head, and then we anchored out of Waikiki Beach, and we stayed there a couple of months. There in Honolulu, and we'd go out every day and have battle practice around the island, and maneuver. And then finally we took off from there and went down to Samoa. We were supposed to be at sea 25 days to go to get to Melbourne. We went to Melbourne. Now I sent you a map of that cruise. Now, and we were on the Melbourne cruise. Some of them went to Sydney, but the Oklahoma went to Melbourne. And we stopped in Samoa, and I've often and anchored at Pango Pango. And I've often said, and still will say, that if I was to wake up in the harbor at Pango Pango and not know where I was, I think it was in heaven. For the simple reason, it was the most beautiful thing you ever seen. There's mountains. It was in landlocked and high mountains on every side, and they looked like there was lace hanging off of them. It was the vines, just hanging down, just hanging off those mountains, and the water just as clear as crystal and just as calm as it could be. But anyway, we went on down to Melbourne, and we stayed there for I think about 3 weeks. We got in there on the 22nd of July, and I celebrated my 21st birthday on the 25th in Melbourne. And I've got some pictures there of when we were leaving Melbourne and the ship coming in. Did you see those?
Yes.
Coming into Melbourne when it was coming up to Princess Pier. We tied up at Princess Pier.
What did you think of Melbourne? The people?
Well, the people were very good in Melbourne. They were very friendly. I went to this station, or where this pier was about 6 miles out of Melbourne, and you had to take a transit or a car or a streetcar to go into Melbourne, and you went into Victoria Station. And I'll never forget my first trip in there. We had prohibition in this country, and I never drank anything. And we got into Melbourne. I said, I'm going to get me something to drink and see what it's like. So I got off of out of the station at Victoria, and I looked across the street, and I seen a bunch of things. And I asked somebody, a bunch of stores, said, what are those things? He said, they're pubs. I said, what's a pub? And he said, well, they sell drinks there. And I said, well, that's what I'm looking for. So I went across the street, and I walked into this place, and I didn't know what to order. I saw signs all the way around the wall, different things, different kinds of drinks. And I looked up there, and I said, there's all English, of course. So I'll take one of those, and I drank it, and it's pretty good. Took one of those over there. I drank about 6 of them. The first thing you know, things begin to go screwy. I walked out on the street, and I tried to get out that gone place, and the sidewalk wouldn't cooperate. And I found a window, a low window, in one of the buildings there, and I sit in this window. Just got in there and sit down in it, you see. And first thing I looked down the street, and here come the cop. One of those big tall hat on. He had his club raking it along the street, raking along the wall, making everybody get up in the wall. Raking the wall, there were a bunch of guys leaning on it, natives down there. And they had some kind of anti-loitering law there. And I noticed he never looked back. And they just, as soon as he'd go by, they just leaned back up against the wall, and he never looked back. He just raking the club along the wall. And I said, my God, if I have to get up here, I'll fall out in the middle of the street. But I managed to get up, and I sit there until I got into Melbourne at the Victoria Station there about right after noon, and I sit in that window until after 4 o'clock. And finally got to where I could get out and get back over to the station to get my train back to the ship. But before I had got too polluted, I saw some wine on the counter, and I bought 2 bottles of it and stuck it in it was winter time down there. It's in July, it was cold, and I was wearing this navy peacoat, and I stuck these two bottles of wine. They're about that big, and one in each pocket. So when I got back down to the pier down there at Princess Pier, I said, "By God, I got to get rid of this stuff here, because if I try to get that back aboard ship, you know, they'd really hang you for it." Well, I drank a little bit out of one of the bottles and threw it over the deck, into the water there. And so, well, I'll try to smuggle this on board. So I put it stuck it down in here. When I got back to that ship, I could have rolled 2 or 3 barrels of it aboard, because there wasn't anybody on the upper deck at all. They were all drunk. And they'd having a dance on the ship, and it all went down in the bottom of the ship. You see, and also the deck there wasn't anybody on it. So I went down to the radio room, and there was a chief petty officer there named Hill. He was the chief radio man. He was standing leaning up against the table, you know, kind of. I says, "Chief, have a drink." He said, "I don't care if I do." And opened this bottle of wine, and he sat there and drank about 2 or 3 drinks of it, and handed it back, and just fell over on the floor and passed out. That's the first time I've ever seen anything like that happen in the Navy, you know, on board a ship like that. Because if they caught, you know, the guys used to get the this glue and stuff, you know, and try to get the alcohol out of it. And formaldehyde they put in the alcohol you had to use on the ship, you know, so that the crew couldn't drink it. And they used it for cleaning purposes. But this formaldehyde, they couldn't distill it and get it out, because it vaporized at about the same temperature as the alcohol and go out with the alcohol. But anyway, I met a young fella down there. I went back to the Victoria station, and this young man approached me as I was coming out the door, and he introduced himself, said, "My name's Roy Hefter," and he said, "I'd like to have you come and have dinner with us today, have lunch." He said, "I live out here in Malvern." He lived on a Malvern, 11 Hunter Street, I believe it was. And Malvern was a subdivision of Melbourne. So I went out there and had lunch with him. And then we decided we'd come down the next day and we'd go out and look around some more. So we went out to what they call Fern Gulch. And this gulch has got Australia, you know, is a continent that's entirely different to any other continent. It's one of the older continents, you know, has never been disturbed, and they have different animals and everything else down there. And this gulch still had some of the vegetation in it that formed the coal that we've got in this country. Those big trees, there are ferns, big ferns, huge ferns. And I took a leaf off of one of it, and it's in that book right down there, still there. Leaf off one of those ferns. And it was the people down there were very friendly. Now, another thing that happened was that the Chinese, a lot of Chinese had come into Australia to work. They worked for practically nothing, but they wanted their money in gold. And the result was that they carried practically all of Australia's gold out. Well, when the Oklahoma went down there, when the battle fleet went down there, why, the United States government sent a bunch of gold down there for the Australians to make pound gold pieces out of, and then send them back, and that's what they paid us with, so we distributed in Australia, see. And as you walk down the street, you'd be approached all the time, "Sailor, you have any gold on you?" They want to trade you paper money for it, see, to get your gold. And we crossed the Tasman Sea. And we left Australia, crossed the Tasman Sea, and it was winter time, and it was rough as the devil. I've got some pictures of it in there. The ship taken from the Nevada, the Oklahoma, plowing through the Antarctic winter. And we went into Wellington, and that country was Old English. It wasn't like the Australians. They wouldn't have a thing to do with us for a while. They were kind of suspicious of us for some reason or other. It didn't take, you know. But after we were down there about a week, it opened up. They got to knowing us, you know, opened up.
What do you think of Australia and New Zealand?
Oh, they're beautiful countries, wonderful countries.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's they're beautiful countries. I mean, the land and everything. Now, since I have had an amateur station, amateur radio station. You can see it there. for years, ever since I got out of the Navy and had when I was in the Navy. And I've been able to keep communicating with them all the time, finding what's going on down there. And then this Discovery Channel on CNN, Cable News Net, on the television, has been running a whole series of information on Australia. It's their 200th anniversary, you know. 200th anniversary now. And they've been going all over Australia and taking pictures of the different animals that live down there and everything. They were entirely a different thing than most any other continent. They have animals entirely different.
Right.
And the rabbits, you know, they didn't have any rabbits down there. And somebody took some rabbits down there, in a few years they'd covered the whole country, and they had a heck of a time killing them all off.
Now, you mentioned you brought a wallaby back.
Yeah, well, Oklahoma brought a wallaby back, yeah. And it was about that high, and they're like a rat. In other words, they don't form an attachment for any individual like a dog would or any other kind of an animal. They're just like, everybody looks alike to them, you see. And our trouble was that if we fired a gun on the ship, any kind of a gun, that wallaby would jump. Well, if he was close to the edge of the water, he'd jump over into the water, you see. And so we had to put him down below the decks every time we fire the guns. We were going to fire a gun, and when he did, he'd jump and hit the ceiling, just the same, you know, just jump. So we had to have something green to eat. They were a vegetarian. And we would assign 2 or 3 men to take that thing ashore with a rope on its neck every time we went into a place where there was something growing on the beach and graze it. Well, it was just too much trouble, so they decided to give it to the zoo in Oklahoma, and I understand that's where they sent it to, Oklahoma City. And then we had a bird, a big white bird about that big that they gave us down there, and that thing would stay up on the ship, and when there was a sea, it'd get out and fly around. One day, it fell into the sea and was drowned. It got in a whirl of wind or something out there, you know. Cockatoo. It was a cockatoo.
Any specific incidents on that cruise that you can recall?
No. Funny things happened. When we were coming back from Australia, we stopped at Samoa. And you know, the natives down in Samoa at that time, they didn't know what money was. In other words, the white people weren't allowed to, or the Americans weren't allowed to go in there and settle, you know. And I remember they had come out to the ship to trade in their canoes, outriggers canoes, come out and run around the ship wanting to trade you things, and that's where I got that club. And they wanted white underclothes. White underclothes. Mostly, that's all that they wanted. And I never will forget that one day when we was coming back through, they let some of them come up on the deck of the ship to do their bartering. And there was a big commotion going on, and what it was some guy trying to give them trying to buy something with some gold coins. And they didn't know what they were, and they were passing them on. They wouldn't give them anything for them. And finally, the officer back told him, said, "No, you don't know anybody offer them any money or anything." Now it seemed like somebody went down there with some cigar coupons and chiseled them one time. They thought it was money. Some sailors, you know, passing through there.
Were you in the maneuvers when the Mississippi had the turret
Yes.
blow up?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
What date?
Yeah, what happened?
Well, there's a picture.
Yeah, I saw the picture.
You've seen the picture there,
Yeah.
yes. The Mississippi and the battle fleet were out having target practice. And the turret number 2 in the front of the ship didn't respond after they'd fired a broadside. It didn't respond to any communications. And of course they immediately started to look, and they saw this smoke stuff coming out from underneath the turret on the doors, you know. And they found out that what had happened, they fire those guns, or they fire a broadside that way. These 3 guns had come back, go up, you see. And no, they come back down. Let's see. Yeah, they come back down to be reloaded. Come back down, and then the doors would be opened, the breeches would be opened, and then there'd be slides come out there, and the powder and the shells and the powder would be put in by electric rammers. They had to be big rammers on them because those shells weighed about 2,000 pounds apiece, and they had 7 bags of powder. Each powder bag had 50 pounds of, let's see, there's 7 bags, and each one had 50 pounds of powder in it. Red end out, they had black powder on the red end. That's what the reason the guns made so much smoke. But the smokeless powder was about as big as your finger, each finger. All right, these people, their guns had been lowered, and were getting ready to overload, to reload. And they shoved in when the powder went in, one of them exploded with the powder, with the breech open. 750 pounds of powder exploded in the turret, and the officer that was in there pushed an alarm button. He lived long enough to push the alarm button. That's how coming to find out what had happened. They got no response. All right, this flames and heat went down into the magazine, but they had automatic doors down there that closed to keep anything that happened in the magazine, in the turret, from getting down into the magazine where the powder was stored. And the heat was so great that it melted those doors together. I mean, welded them together when they went down. Well, of course, they couldn't get into it, and they came back into port, and it was caused quite a commotion. And they, after the thing cooled off, so they could get into the turret to see what had happened, they got in there, and I'll be damned if they didn't set another gun off. There was one in there that was loaded, and they fired it. Something was wrong, and the thing went off in port. And fortunately, it was pointed out to sea, and there was a ship out there called the Catalina that ran from San Pedro to Catalina Islands, carried passengers back and forth. And that 14-inch shell fell in the wake of that ship and caused a panic aboard it. And there was 80-some men killed in the thing.
Yeah, I saw a photograph of the funeral.
At the funeral. Yeah.
Let me see. Where did you leave for the Great Cruise? What port did you leave from for the Great Cruise?
From San Francisco.
And you returned to San Francisco?
No, we left the ship when we were coming back. We left the ship at Honolulu and came back to Bremerton, Washington, to have some repairs made.
Tell me about crossing the equator.
Well, that's the craziest thing you ever seen. That they had all the old timers that had been across the equator. Well, they dressed up in all kinds of crazy clothes. You've seen some of the pictures there, I think. All kinds of crazy clothes. They had cops to go around, and hunt the guys that were hiding. And they had a big stand built up on the ship, and behind it had put a canvas tank full of water. All right, you went up on that stand, and there was a judge up there. And you went before the judge, and he would pronounce the sentence on you, ask if you're guilty of being a wetback. And of course you had to say yes. So he pronounced the sentence. Right, sent him to the barber chair. So, or to the electric chair. He had 2 or 3 chairs up there, and he sent to the barber chair, and the guy there with a pot of grease and stuff, and just smeared all over your face, and just shove you in the face like that. And the chair had hinges on it, and dump you into that water back there. And there was a bunch of guys down there with clubs made out of cotton, and they just whipped the dickens out of you while you were in the water trying to get out. And then there was another outfit. They had a long tube, canvas tube, about that big around, and it was full of flour and potatoes. And they'd run you through that and beat you all the way through it. Whip you on the rear end. Just quite a deal. Did you see the pictures of those representatives of Oklahoma from Oklahoma that went took the trip in one of those?
And okay, I'll go through it again.
No, it's not in one. I don't believe it's in one of those. It's in the big one there. That one there. That on the back there. Turn that lid back over again.
This one.
Is that Oklahoma's
That's state seal.
state?
Yes. Because Oklahoma was a 46 state, so there's 45 stars around the 1 star. So 45 stars and the big star makes 46.
Yeah.
Let me see.
It took a week's field day to clean that ship up after we crossed the equator. We had a field day every week. We used to have it once a week, you know. On Friday, we'd have to scrub the decks and sand them, sand the decks, polish all the bright work, and keep things just immaculate. Everything had to be just so, you know. But it took a week to get that ship back in shape again after we crossed the equator. Get that tar and stuff off the decks.
Did you have the teak wood decks?
Teak wood, yeah.
How'd you clean those?
Well, we used what they call a holy stone. It was a brick that had a hollow place at the top of it, and you had a handle you put in, and they put sand all over the decks and water, and then you went down each board, one end to the other, you know, in your area, the area you're responsible for, and polished that board with that sand, rubbed it, and then when you got through, that's why they washed it all off with a hose, and the deck could turn pretty white and pretty, that wood, teak wood deck.
Any other specific incidents that happened on the Oklahoma that you can recall?
No. Oh, yes. Here's one that's kind of, I think of one real often. We went through the Panama Canal and into Gunai's Haiti. And we spent about 3 months anchored in that harbor, that is, going in and out doing battle maneuvers. And they would not let a soul go ashore there. You know why? Because they said the natives all had venereal diseases. It didn't affect them. If the white man went over there, he'd get it. And they said that Columbus, when he went back to Europe, carried it back to Europe, and they hadn't had it over there. And it spread all over Europe in just a few years. And they would not let us go ashore. But funny thing happened, while we were anchored there in the harbor, one of my radio men, I was installing some new radio equipment aboard the ship that we got. We found out on this trip down to Australia that there was a lot of weak places in our communication system. We didn't have high frequencies, we had low frequencies that we worked on then, and they had, some of the cruisers had 60,000 watt transmitters on them, arc transmitters, working on low frequencies, and they could not get out of the harbor at Wellington, New Zealand at all to get back to the States. We were completely out of communications. But there was an amateur operator from the American Radio League who had went along. He was a lieutenant in the Navy, Naval Reserve officer, and he carried a shortwave 100-watt rig with him. And that man was able to, with that 100-watt shortwave rig, to communicate with Washington, D.C. when those 60,000-watt transmitter couldn't touch him. And so when we got back to, as I told him, we went to Honolulu and then to Bremerton and then on around to Gunai's Haiti, and while we was down there where some of this, we got this new equipment aboard and I was installing it, and I had an assistant named Franklin D. Unruh. He was from Pretty Prairie, Kansas, and he got sick over there. And he just kept getting sick and sicker, and I kept trying to get him to go to sick bay and he wouldn't go. And one night he had to call somebody, come by his bunk, and told him I had to get him up to sick bay. He was about to die, and he had spinal meningitis, and that was a heck of a thing. Now, if had nobody been ashore for so long, see, and there I was working in this room with him all that time there, right, breathing the same air he was and everything. But anyway, why they sent him over to the hospital relief, and then they sent some little cans that looked like jelly, and they made every man on the ship breathe on one of those 2 or 3 times and put the lid on it and put his name on it and sent it back to the hospital ship relief, and so they could analyze it to see if there was a carrier on board the ship that had this disease and was carrying it. It wasn't affecting him, but he'd give it to the rest of the crew.
You were on on the Oklahoma, you say 3 years?
3 years and 7 months.
3 years and 7 months.
Three.
What are the main duties of a radio operator?
Well, of course, we had a number of different duties. We had to watch on the our flagship there. We had radio communication between our flagship, which was the Pennsylvania, and then we had communications with the A7L, I believe it was. That was the California. That was the commander of the battle fleet, you know. We had direct communications with him. And then we had to copy what they called hypos and preps. Every hour, the hypos, they'd start sending naval orders from Washington, D.C., and we had to copy them. Then they'd send them to San Francisco, NPL, station NPL at San Francisco, and we'd have to copy what they added to it. And then they'd send them to Honolulu, NPN at Honolulu, and we'd copy them again there, see if they'd added anything to it, and then to the Philippine Islands, and then they'd send theirs back, start back. We'd have to, every hour while we'd be going through that copy, had to all that copied on the typewriter, you know, and made into a, because it gave all the ship's movements in the Navy and where they were assigned to and everything. It was peacetime. There was no secrets to it.
Did you work with the semaphores as a signalman?
No, well, you see, the signal gang was a different section. Now, they worked with but they required seamen, every seaman, to get to be a seaman class, to know the semaphore. But the signalman on the ship used blinker lights, you know. They could pull a thing and get sent code.
And how long were you in the Navy?
How long? I was in about 3 years and 7 months.
So your whole Navy career was on the Oklahoma. What did you do after the Navy?
What?
What did you do after the Navy?
After the Navy, I came home and got a job in a repair shop here, radio repair shop, and repaired radios. And then I decided that the police department needed a radio, and I talked about letting me build them one. I built them a radio transmitter and 4 receivers. That way, why they could send their cars out to do patrol work and communicate with them, see?
December 7th, 1941.
December the 7th, 41.
Japan attacked Hawaii, and you heard the Oklahoma had sunk. What was your reaction?
Yes. I'll tell you how when I heard it. My wife and I went down that morning to Reed Automobile Company to buy a new Buick. It was on Sunday morning, I believe it was. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Sunday morning. We went down there to buy a new automobile, and the salesman had made arrangements to meet us down there. It was Sunday, and they were supposed to be closed, but I was on the police department at the time, and I didn't, and had Sunday off. We went down there, and the salesman acted kind of funny. He seemed to be, we was looking at these cars, you know, trying to pick out the one that we wanted. And finally he says, have y'all listened to the radio this morning? I said, no, I haven't heard it this morning. He said, well, he said the Japanese attacked the Pearl Harbor last night. He said they sunk the Oklahoma, and he gave them a list of ships. And I said, oh my God. You know, we decided we wouldn't buy the automobile because we didn't know what was coming next. It's a big mistake we made. We should have went ahead and bought it. But he said he knew that just as soon as he told me that, we wouldn't buy it.
So what did you think about the Oklahoma when you heard it sunk?
About being sunk?
Yeah.
Well, knowing how the ship was built, the heavy armor it had on it, I knew that the Japanese must have something real potent. Because I used to get down on that armor. It was 18 inches and walk along on it, alongside the ship, you know.
On that blister ledge?
Huh?
The blister ledge along the side of the ship?
Yeah, it stuck out, 18 inches.
Right.
18 inches of armor. And then on top of that's what they call the gun deck, you know, it's 6 inches. And it was built kind of slanting, just a slide, so if a shell hit it, it scoot off instead of going in it. All the magazines were below that particular part of the ship.
Whenever anyone mentions the USS Oklahoma, what do you think of?
What?
Whenever anyone mentions the USS Oklahoma, what do you think of?
Well, I think that it was a wonderful ship. It's a like I've been telling y'all here, I owe it a lot. If it hadn't been for the USS Oklahoma, I don't know where I'd be today. I sure don't. And look, to me, I always give God credit for steering me, because He steered me through so many different things. I could have went so many different places, but I wound up on the Oklahoma, got into radio, and my whole life has been everything. All the success in my life has been around my radio, and my sons too. He took after me, and he wound up being at the White House for 7 years as presidential communication officer, and is retired from the Army now.
Whenever they raise the Oklahoma, they're being towed back and it's sunk again.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, first thing I thought of, well, the poor thing is sunk where we used to cross there when it was afloat. It's in 3 miles of water?
It's pretty deep.
3 miles of water, it's sinking about 3 miles of water?
It's pretty close to that. It's
Well, I know that the tug that was towing it just got loose from it, because it would have pulled it down. They didn't have 3 miles of cable. And I've got that dope there on this Oklahoma organization that I belong to. They had an interview with this tug operator here some years ago, and he told about how they had to fight to get the cable off of the tug to keep it from pulling the tug under when it went down.
Yeah, but what did you think whenever you heard that it sunk again?
What?
What did you think when you heard that it sunk again?
Well, I just was sorry, but of course it didn't. It don't really matter. They brought it back here. They'd have melted it down. So,
do you have any questions? Now, Mr. Esnick is one of those 32 cut out of the ship.
yes, I know. That's what he told me. Where was your quarters at? How come? What
Third Division.
Third Division. Where was it? Where was their quarters now?
Back after in the aft end, about just little behind midships, and
Aft.
yeah.
And the heads used to be back there. Were they still there?
Well, yes. I mean, everything was back. I mean, facilities, you know.
Now our radio room was right on the tail end of the ship, where the shark, and right above that, just above the water, you know.
I wish we had that. We could run over that right while I was here, you know, and I don't know
Didn't
why
even think about it.
I didn't think a thing about it, you know, and I'm sorry I didn't now.
Mr. Douglas.
Crossing the equator on the Oklahoma. And the other thing up above it there is it'll sell the sailors, make a little money off it, I guess. It's got the picture of the Oklahoma on it, and the name Australia. And of course this club here, I brought it back. It came back on the Oklahoma from Pango, Samoa.
Okay, the what did you say the club is again?
What?
The club?
Oh yeah, that's I traded an undershirt for this at Pango. It's a war club, Samoan war club, and you notice it's made flat and wide. And the reason of it is the wood they have down there is brittle. They have to hit edgeways with it. If they hit like this, they'd break it. The wood, they don't have any hard wood like it. They have to make it edgeways. You want to see the other side of it? I can turn it around. I've just got glass on both sides.
Huh.
Here we are in the Tasman Sea. That's in the Tasman Sea.
Where is this taking? They firing the guns.
Every now and then, that's something I bought on the ship somewhere. That That's a typical broadside there. The ship,
Yeah.
ship would slide sideways 10 feet when it's fired. That's the Maui, I believe. Little Hannah. Here's a Samoan girl.
Oh, yeah.
Never will forget they. Yeah, in Samoa they.
That was.
Larger picture of the Oklahoma here.
Yeah, I saw one.
Yeah.
I think it's right here.
All right. Yeah, right here in the stern, you see, was where the radio school was, right there.
So you're right in the very stern.
Yeah, that's a school. Of course, our headquarters was way back up here, on below the gun deck, right next to this turret here, down about 2 decks. But anyway, there was portholes back there, and when we was in Samoa, why these natives came out there and had a bunch of girls with them, on these canoes, there were a bunch of women, and the Marines had their quarters right down. The portholes weren't about 6 or 8 feet across from the water. And they tried to get one of these girls through there, and they got her all through her hips, and they couldn't get her. She was hung in the port. Got a picture somewhere of the Shenandoah flying over the Oklahoma. Have you seen that any?
There's 3 from the Tasman Sea.
Tasman Sea, yeah, they were taken from the Nevada.
Can I take one of those?
Yeah. Pick what you want. Here's our planes.
This calls for 12 original 5-inch here on this one. See?
Yeah.
10, 12, and now, so where's the torpedo jig? Don't say anything about it?
Does it say anything about it? I don't believe it does.
No, sir, it sure don't.
It don't say anything about the anti-aircraft guns either, does it?
12, 5-inch.
12 5-inch. Yeah.
12, 5-inch. Then don't say anything about any other anti-aircraft.
We had 8 anti-aircraft guns on there.
Yeah.
3-inch guns.
Yeah. Well, it sure don't say anything about.
Do you have a photograph of yourself in uniform?
Yes, I've got one, but it wasn't taken on the Oklahoma. I've got, well, I tell you, there's some here. Let's see. Here we are anchored off of,
Yeah.
here we are anchored off of Diamond Head.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Here's that moth, stuff I was telling about I brought from Australia.
Oh, yeah.
Here's my brother, he was in the Navy at the same time, but he was on the Procyon. You know, I've only got about 1 picture of me taking aboard the ship. And I was with 2 or 3 other guys. That's one that... Yeah, here I am, right here. That's the only time. That's the only picture I've got of me. Wait a minute, hold it. Those are the 2 representatives from Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
They're the ones that made the trip with us, not cruise. Would you like their picture there to take it? Yeah. All right. Look on the back of it. It don't say anything. All right, but
I'll look in the file and see.
well, I've got their names here
Oh, okay,
somewhere.
okay.
It tells in some of these things here what it is.
Now, what are you going to do with your whole collection of the Oklahoma?
Well, I don't know. Oh, would you all like to have it?
Yes. Because we can,
Well-
a lot of stuff here, especially like the Australia and crossing the equator, that we can put in our display on the Oklahoma with the silver service and everything.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me talk to my sons,
Okay.
and I'll just may will it to you.
Okay.
Because after I'm gone, you see, these things don't
Yeah, right.
don't matter to most everybody.
And tell them it'll be on the permanent display there. It'll be available for them to look at whenever.
Yeah.
and then also it'll add to the history of the ship.
But I might just let the whole thing go. I mean, just
Yeah.
the whole business.
Well, talk to your family.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'd like to. Now here we are coming alongside Princess Pier in Melbourne,
Okay.
and this is you see, it's got a white E on the stack. Can you
Yes,
see
there
it?
is the white E.
Yeah, I remember that, but I say I don't know what, you know, they had different, they would compete for different, you know, standings in the.
That's white engineering.
Right, engineering, yeah.
Here's a funny thing. You see this thing out there? That's the shell. you got in the picture.
You could actually see those 14.
Oh yeah,
You could actually see them.
The darndest thing we ever
If
had
you just, you know,
was we went out for target practice one night, at night, firing at about 5 or 6 miles, something like that. And when we brought the targets back alongside the ship, there was a 14-inch shell sitting up on one of them.
well, for crying out loud.
We come alongside it and hooked the things on. It wasn't explosive, you know. They were target shells and launched it back aboard ship.
No, you can see them towing that target way out there. You didn't think that anything could go out there and hit a target like that.
You know, I got my ears hurt. You know, I still, I got my ears hurt with a doggone 14-inch gun. I still can't hear high-pitched sounds.
The 5-inch guns were the hardest on my ears. They were more of a what, you know, the concussion from the 14s, you know, it just blew you out. I mean,
yeah. But I happened to be right in the New York, and I was on the mid deck, and the guns were right out over me, two 14-inch guns, and they fired them, and it tore there were some lockers in that room, and those lockers exploded. The vacuum was so great.
Well, there was a officer's mess attendant went out on deck. He was supposed to stay inside. And during 14-inch gun practice, I mean, everybody stayed in the clear whenever you fired those dudes. And he walked out there. He was close to one of them, and he had these white duds on it he wore during mess, you know, and it just blew him. It just ripped some of his pants legs.
Well, I tell you what it did to me. It pulled my undershirt clear out, and it was hanging out my.
He said that old boy liked it.
Let me see. There's somewhere that I've got the names of.
5th Division.
Yeah, that's the 5th Division. That's what I was in. But that was a boat crew, and I wasn't in it at
You
that
were
time.
not.
I was at that
Okay.
time, but it just happened to be that I
Okay.
wasn't on duty at that time.
Oh, there's a funeral for the Mississippi again.
Yeah, that.
And here's the large photograph of that. There's a funeral for Mississippi.
Yeah, I put it in there because
Yeah.
it'll get bent up. In
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, talk to your family and see what they say, and tell them that it'll be well cared for.
Yeah. Now these things are very interesting. Let me see here what I've got here. I put some notes in here. Yeah, here. Look here. Last pages. All right, look here. I'll tell you who those people are. Learn.
Here's your, I don't know where you want.
Yeah, just lay it down.
There's the captain, Scott, and there he is again with the command, with the executive officer.
We're up to Samoa. Let's see where we are here.
Did you put these in this binder?
This, yeah. Yeah, I got the book on board. They stole them on board the ship.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, so it's stole away.
I wish they would have permitted stuff like this when I did. See, I'm just, at loss for anything at all. They just wouldn't let you keep anything, pictures of any kind, or any written memories or events. And all you had to do is rely on what you can muster and gather now,
Yeah.
see, or after. And it's hard to recall all those things. For me it is.
Oh, yeah.
And I just can't.
Automobile yell.
Here we are. Right here.
Okay.
Now you can read that, you can get their names.
JV.
And these two representatives of Oklahoma that made that trip.
Rossboro and McClintock.
Was right on the
Yeah.
back.
JV. And let me see. History.
Here's my Liberty Pass. I still have it. They let me keep it.
I think I have a Liberty Pass. I think it's from the Saratoga aircraft carriers. I don't. Oh, do you know Jack Parsons?
Parsons?
Yeah, he's a Pearl Harbor survivor. He was on the Oklahoma from 26. I mean, let's see. 36, 37 to
No, that's
40.
That's past
But-
my time.
Yeah, I know, but I thought maybe you might know him here. He lives over here. He operates these mini storage over here on Crosstown.
I don't know him.
And I think a gentleman named Dunn owns it.
Paint from the
That
Oklahoma.
is a piece of paint, and that's off of the airplane. Now this piece of paint here went into the Navy Yard, and we scraped the ship,
Yeah.
and of course it had several coats on it. There was big, thick pieces of it there. And then I had over here a piece of the deck wood, and doggone it, I lost it out of there. Pieces of where they take it.
What's this?
That's paint off of the airplane.
Oh, okay.
Off one of the airplanes.
Well, do you have any questions that you have about the Oklahoma?
I've been trying to think. He's covered pretty well.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to give you this photograph.
Oh, yeah.
That's the
Thank
first
you.
crew in 1917.
First crew in 1970.
And of course, it still has the old cage mast.
Yeah. Thank you. Here's where she used to look. See what I have to say, the little poem I got on the bottom of it?
That's all that.
Fair ship, fly the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where had an accident on the Oklahoma. The guy two-blocked his crane and broke the cable, and this thing fell through the deck of the boat. One of the lifeboats.
No, they sure made that Oklahoma look different when they removed those, went through its modernization.
I've got a book in here that my son picked up for me.
See, I don't know just whether, what this information on these guns, anti-aircraft equipment, was after or before, or whether that was definitely a misprint. See, but now you see the verification is on the torpedo tubes.
Yeah, right.
So there, that is settled. But I'm not sure. Like I told him, I said I wasn't sure, but I mean the armament called for in everything I've read, and so it is a big misprint if they did that. If they
Yeah.
made a mistake.
In here is a ship scale, a modeler. The fellow built a model of the Oklahoma, And it's you look through there and you'll find it's the first section of pictures in there. Just keep it's great big pictures. You can't miss them. Just keep turning them. The whole story's about it.
What book is it? Scale Ship?
It's a modeler's book. Where the old boys make models of fish ships, you know, and all kinds of things.
New Jersey.
Have you found it yet?
I'm looking.
Sure you didn't pass it.
I don't think I did.
Quite a story, you know. That's a lot of big pictures. You might be able to find some kinfolks, those people there in Oklahoma yet.
Yeah.
You got your Tasman Sea picture put away there, did you? You one that you wanted?
Yeah, yeah. That's another one there.
Those were taken from the Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
It was in July, no, August 1924, 25.
Was that the Oklahoma?
No. U.S.S. Farm or something.
No.
I think it's in there.
Well, I just.
Start from the back. Is that it? No.
It should.
There you
There
are.
we go. There we go.
There you are. That's a model. You know that we had the first, I don't know whether you knew this or not, but the Oklahoma had the first catapult on it of any battleship.
It did.
To launch a plane.
Huh.
The first catapult.
Mm-hmm.
And I come here and you're having to get on with that darn thing, and I'm glad I didn't. They wanted to assign me as a radio operator on the plane because I get extra money. The radio officer called me up there and he said, "Say, I got some extra money." I said, "Hi," I said, "I'll make you a radio operator on one of the planes, on the plane." I said, "Hell no, I don't want that." And I said, I know one of the boys that does need the money though. He's trying to support his family, and he's a fellow named Thompson. I said, if it would be all right if you change it to his name, if he wants it, and he said yes.
I'll give you that one too. That's an extra picture.
What is this?
This is.
What are you looking at those without glasses for? What are you looking at all that stuff without glasses?
I don't need glasses.
This is Lorena Cruz, the daughter of Governor Cruz, and she's the one that christened the Oklahoma.
One what christened the Oklahoma?
Yeah, 1914.
Now this was taken in 1914.
1914 at Camden, New Jersey, when they christened the Oklahoma.
I'm gonna put right there on the back
Okay.
of it too.
Yeah, let me.
Look at this. Is that? See these planes here?
Yeah. Now we didn't have we had the two planes on the back. We didn't have that. Now some of the other ships did have them on the turrets, mounted on the turrets at that time.
Yeah, but this. Look at this. What type of plane?
Well, no, didn't you see the pictures of the planes we had
Yeah,
here?
but they were bi-wing planes.
They
They
are.
were Kingfisher. That don't look like a bi-wing job there, does it?
No, it's a single wing.
That's a single wing plane.
Well, that's all right. That's a late picture of the Oklahoma. Did y'all have the single wing planes on it?
No, we had they might have before swapped, but I'm pretty sure they had those Kingfisher. Seemed to me like they did. Maybe they didn't.
No, we had bi-wing planes on the ship, and
Well, they might have changed those. I'm not sure, but I used to sit and watch them. You know, it was interesting where they drop this net overboard, you know, and lift inboard. You know, to hook this.
well, I tell you how we used to do it. They'd taxi up behind the ship, see?
Yeah, the ship would circle.
Yeah, and taxi up behind them on the right side of the wind, you know. So,
Right.
and then they'd drop a hook out there with that boom, and the aviator, he was sitting out in the open, you know. You just reach up and get it, hook it in a hook,
Yeah, that sling.
Yeah, and they'd hoist the thing aboard, and I never will forget, they pulled one or two planes under that way. Jerked it, they got, when they started to, the ship moved too fast or something, and they pulled them right under the water.
Normally they'll, when I was on there, they would take and circle and get the ocean in a clear, I mean, get a smooth surface.
Place, yeah.
Then they would drop this net overboard and he'd taxi right up onto the net.
Put an arrow underneath over, and I messed up on the date, but it's 1914.
Okay, mighty good. Thank you.
According to this, there was mistakes made on the amount of 5-inch guns that was on that dude.
It was?
Yeah, according to my armament business I have on all the stuff, literature I've got.
What do they claim?
Well, they don't claim anything on it. I haven't checked the list, but it doesn't show in here that there could be that many 5-inch on there.
We had 12 of them, 5 on each side, and then 2 up above on the upper deck.
But seems like I have the scale. I mean the scaled engineer's version. I mean the actual decking and everything and the gunnery. And I think it showed more than 12 on there after modification.
It may have after modification, but there's another thing. Where was the officers' quarters when you were?
Oh, I never did. It was
were they forward or aft?
Forward, I think.
Forward. But you know that on the later ships, you know they were all aft.
Well, I think theirs was almost completely forward. Best I can recall now. I'd
all
have
of
to
them
check.
are forward now. Huh?
I think there was now.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Are you familiar with the Silver Service on the ship?
No, I'd seen it, but I didn't have any business being in the officers' quarters.
That's
or
me.
the
I
mess
never.
men. But this don't mean anything to me. But I've been down there and seen it. You know,
Yeah.
we used to have all the bellhops on the ship were Filipinos,
Yeah.
and but the officers' quarters were painted blue.
They were.
Was it blue or light green? Which was it?
The what?
The officers' quarters. When you got into them, they were blue, or
Oh,
the walls were green.
I
or blue.
sure I couldn't tell you.
They were blue. On the Oklahoma, they were a
See,
light green.
See, I wasn't on there, but just maybe a couple of months. You know,
Well,
I didn't know any, I
that's
didn't know
state seal.
anyone. I didn't know that much about the ship.
Yeah, I see.
It has the
Yeah, I see.
yeah.
That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to learn. You know what the ship did have, what it didn't have, and the information I'm reading, and all I can do is quote what I'm reading.
Well, our radio room at that time was right down after number 2 turret, right down under the armored deck. You know, they had a 6-inch armored deck there.
Yeah.
It was right down on that, right over the magazines. The radio room was.
Now, whenever you wasn't on, you know, that was a big city to me. That when I went on there, it was just something.
But that's when they're cutting the men out of the Oklahoma.
That's what?
That's the upturned hull, and that's when they're cutting the men out.
I've got some pictures taken in the dry dock here of Oklahoma.
But, Mr. Dunn, here's this magazine here.
Okay.
That's interesting. Let's scale them up.
This fellow made a model of it, you know.
Mhm.
This is a picture of a model. It's not the,
Well,
but
Joe, they have a model of that. I wonder who built that one that they have model that they had in Oklahoma City. You know, they had one sitting there
Yeah.
in the
I don't know where that came from. Now we have
motel room.
Now we have the official Navy model before they built the ship. That thing must be 20 feet long.
Yeah, I understand.
the
I've never
occasion
seen
master.
that. Yes.
this Schrader that signed this thing,
Mm-hmm.
I found out some years later why. He hated the guts of that of that division officer of mine. They didn't get along. They did it for spite. And he was killed. He was transferred from the ship, and he was up in New Jersey somewhere, and he was put in charge of a Navy ammunition dump up there. And the thing exploded, and he was killed. Some of the shells exploded. They
Yeah.
killed him.
Well, I think we have a good interview.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, every little
Now
bit.
this letter that you sent me, it's got in your card there. It's got
Yes, sir.
all the addresses I need on it.
Yeah. And we have, as I said, in fact, I want to invite you up to Oklahoma City December 7th. because we're going to dedicate the new display on the Oklahoma, which we don't
Well,
believe.
no, I wouldn't. I'm staying at home now the rest of my days. I had a thing happen to me here a few days ago. It's kind of upset me. I had a cat here, a pet, you know, my pet's cat. The only thing I had around the place that loved me and disappeared. I can't find it.
I brought this down for you also. In here. We'll go ahead. Tear it up.
Hope we didn't break it.
No. This is a story a man wrote about the christening of the Oklahoma. And then I think here's here's some of the Xerox of the pictures.
So you got me this picture already.
Yeah. And that's when she's sliding down. And then here is another short history of the Oklahoma.
Well, see, there's in the Tasman Sea right there.
Oh, okay.
Somebody else got that too. Passes through 7th. See here it says, with her E on her stack and float planes on her stern, the cage-messed Oklahoma plows through heavy seas in 1925. That was in the Tasman Sea.
Yep. And this goes all the way through up to Pearl Harbor. And then when they raised the ship, and has the last photograph when just before she was being towed and when she sunk in mid-Pacific.
Let's see if we can find what come with the Wallaby.
Okay. And in fact, these are packets I made up when I gave my talk on the Oklahoma. And there's more stuff in there too.
Well, thank you very much. I
Yes, sir.
appreciate that.
I guess we need to help you get some of this stuff.
Yeah, let me turn this off.